Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am super thankful to have you with me today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me on my knitting podcast series. My name is Samantha and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind the Strikkechick. So I have one finished object to update you on today, and a couple of whips that I am calling spring knits, but I don't know if you would necessarily classify them as spring knits, depending on where you live. So for those of you who are new here, hi, welcome. So happy to have you. But I live in a city in the Arctic Circle of Norway that is called Tromsø. So right now, in the middle of April, we have quite a bit of snow still. Like, it's not actively snowing, but there is a healthy layer of snow on the ground. Temperatures are just getting into the positives, or above 32 degrees for you Americans out there. And yeah, it's pretty chilly still, and it kind of continues on like this until about June or July is when the weather really starts warming up. I mean, it gets it gets into the teens and maybe 20 degrees Celsius if it's a really good day, which is like around 70-ish degrees Fahrenheit. So when I say spring, I kind of mean like a sweater spring. So I've been casting on a couple of those whips. And yeah, I just, I've been, since the last finished object works in progress acquisition video I filmed for you guys, I had a little bit of a knitting injury, which is not something I ever thought at 26 years old I would be saying before I picked up knitting. But so the finished object that I'm going to show you guys, it was a very intense sweater to knit. And I wanted to finish it up really, really fast because I was going on a little Easter holiday with my fiance Kevin to a place in northern Norway called Senja, which is this really pretty mountain range, which I guess isn't so impressive when you live in Tromsø because we're surrounded by so many majestic mountains as is. So like we went to Senja and we were like, you know what, this is probably really cool if you don't live in Tromsø. But yeah, it was still just nice to get away. It was nice to see something a little bit different. And when I was there, I wanted to wear some very heavy colorwork sweaters because that's what you wear in Norway when you're out and about. So this sweater I really wanted to finish before that trip, and I knit on it a little bit too hard, I think, and I ended up kind of pulling something like a tendon or something in my wrist. So I was resting it for quite a bit. I think about a week I didn't knit, and so I was really active on pattern writing because of that. So I wrote a lot of blog posts, I finished up some grading, I did other non-knitting stuff because I had to keep my hands busy somehow. So I don't have that much in the way of new stuff to show you, but I think since then I've been knitting with a bit of a fervor, so I hope you'll still have enough to keep you entertained. As always, we are going to start off with what I'm wearing today. And this is kind of cool because it is a pattern that will be out or released on Monday. So the day after this video goes live, which is kind of unfortunate timing, but that's just how it worked out. I will release this pattern on my website. So if you like it, you can make your own and we can twin. I love twinning. This is the Maryland Heights sweater. It is knit in Quince & Co. Owl, which is just a really, really nice, I think it's like worsted weight yarn. It's very light. It's about like 105 meters ish. Don't quote me on that. For 50 grams skein. It has more meterage in it than Letlepi for a 50 gram skein. And Letlepi is one of the yarn alternatives I recommend for this sweater. It is a little bit woolly. Like it feels kind of rustic. It's on my skin right now because I'm inside, and I didn't want to put on a layer underneath my sweater. So I can really feel the wool. It feels a little bit scratchy, but it's not supposed to be worn directly on your skin. It's supposed to be worn with like a turtleneck or wool underwear or something underneath in true hiking fashion. Or if you want a less itchy alternative, Drops Lima is one that I've recommended in the pattern. It's it has this kind of Fair Isle, I think you can see, Fair Isle motif on the yoke. It's got some matching Fair Isle on the sleeves, and it has some Fair Isle on the body, which I don't think I can pop up and show you because I'm a bit restrained at the moment, but I can put a photo of it on the screen so you can see what that looks like. Because the point of this was I really just wanted to do as much color work as I could and still have a couple sections of kind of like basic color-y yarn. So that is where the Maryland Heights kind of idea came from. And this is my first ever colorwork sweater design. So it is really fun to have and to wear. It is so warm in the yoke area. So maybe seasonally, if you live somewhere more like me, if you are transitioning into some colder temps at the moment, this might be more of a pattern for you. Otherwise, save it. It's a great fall sweater. I wore this quite a bit in the fall when I had just cast off my my sample. And actually that's what inspired the name Maryland Heights for this design. Is like, I wanted to make something that would feel perfectly at home on a fall hike on the Maryland Heights Trail, which is my favorite hiking trail near where my parents live in the DC area in the States. So I will leave a link to that in the description below, and if you're interested in learning more about the sweater and making your own, you can just click on that link and check out the details and see how other people knit their sweaters and to join in the fun. Yeah, so moving on to our regularly scheduled programming. My first finished object that I have for you is something I am super duper proud of. This is my O Elegancer 1994. Oh my gosh, you guys, this was such a labor of love to create, but I am so happy with how it turned out, and I'll put like a picture of me wearing it in here. But this is the Magnum Opus of my knitting journey. It just, oh my gosh, it took me forever to knit. It's knit from the bottom up. Yes, it's hard for me to get the whole thing in the frame, but it's knit from the bottom up, and it's supposed to be knit entirely in the round and then steeked at the very end. So you're supposed to knit it in the round till you get to the collar, then you knit front and back and bind off for the neck, and then you knit the sleeves from the bottom up in the round, steek here along the sides, and then you're supposed to like attach the sleeves to where it's been steeked. And I have never steeked in my life, so I was not looking to try steeking for the first time on this sweater, just because of how much work I put into it. So I actually, and I can add this to my Ravelry project page if anyone is interested in how I modified this sweater, but I wanted to knit it as seamless as possible. I know that isn't the traditional way to knit a Norwegian sweater, but I just feel really confident comfortable not seaming. So I figured that the way to go about it was that I would just kind of look at the charts, because this whole thing is one big chart. I say this to people when they want to knit this sweater, but they are not comfortable reading Norwegian patterns, because unfortunately the version of the pattern that I have found is only in Norwegian. The kind of saving grace for this is that because it's a mostly charted pattern, you can basically knit it without, just put the instructions in Google Translate and it'll almost do the entire job for you. And then you can just follow the chart for the whole body and the sleeves. And that's the entire sweater, is just following the chart. So I looked at the chart and I calculated where I would need to switch back and forth for the armholes. So I did that. And then I used a 3-needle bind off on the wrong side of the work to seam the shoulders together. And then I picked up and knit sleeves from the top down. So I just read the chart upside down, and then instead of increasing stitches for the sleeves, I decreased stitches for the sleeves. So it wasn't that much of a modification. I did use the recommended yarn in the pattern. I used Dalagarn natural lanolin wool, which is 100% new Norwegian wool. And the color, I have the colorways on my Ravelry project page already. It was like a kind of charcoaly black, an off-white, like they call it unbleached white, I think, and then like an olive green, something called sun yellow, klarred, which is like a clear red, I think is the translation. So those are the colors that I used, and those are recommended official pattern colors. So yeah, this is, I feel so majestic wearing it. It was so fun to knit up. It was so fun to wear. My one big kind of drawback with this sweater was I was reading the charts for the body on my computer, because I tried to print out the charts, and for me, I just could not get it on large enough paper where it made sense to print it out. So I just had it on my computer, and I like zoomed in 200 or to 200%, and I was reading the chart on my screen. But for some reason, and I say this as someone who I consider myself a pretty experienced knitter, but as I was reading this chart on my screen, I did not realize until I was almost done with the charts on the body that I was reading them the wrong way. So I was reading the charts from the left to the right instead of the right to the left, like I was supposed to. So what I have done, essentially, is I've flipped around the two side panels. It's basically a mirror image of what it should be. And when I found out, I was devastated, and I just wanted to unravel the whole thing. But then I was like, okay, if I unravel this now, I will not find the motivation to pick it back up again and finish it. And it was like, I mean, yeah, it's wrong, but it still looks majestic. It was still a really impressive piece, I think, to knit for colorwork knitting. So I just kept it. I just kept going. And now I'm kind of happy, because like there's all these little mistakes. I mean, the biggest one obviously is that the panels on the front are mirrored, but there are these little mistakes, like, you know, once in a while I would forget a contrast color stitch, or I forget which sleeve it was on. Oh, yeah, this one. I messed up the triangles up here a bit. And like all these little things that like I marked down when I was knitting, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna fix this once I'm done. And now that I'm done, and I've blocked, and I've woven in the ends, and I've worn it, and I love how it fits. I think you'll be able to see in the picture, the fit is amazing, and it is so comfortable. But like looking at those little mistakes now, I'm like, those aren't mistakes, that's character. And that's, I think part of my journey as a knitter and a perfectionist has been trying to embrace the little mistakes that I make on my knitting, because if I wanted something perfect, I could just buy it, right? But like those little imperfections, those are handmade. Those are like what make it homemade and special and unique. And I don't think anyone else has like the little mirrored motifs on their sweater. So that's what makes mine kind of different. And it's just kind of nice. So I think I'll leave it. And it's still a really, really nice sweater to have. So I'm a big fan personally. My next, okay, that was it for finished objects. The next thing I want to show you is almost a finished object, but it isn't quite. And that is my mom's Soleia vest. So I've shown you this a couple times. And I think the last time I showed you, I was in the middle of a row, so I couldn't quite show you exactly what it was supposed to look like. But this is the Soleia vest in the size 4, knit 1 centimeter longer than the pattern specifies, because my mom just wanted it a little bit longer. I took her measurements when I was in the States, so I knit it to those. And this is unblocked, so I have cast it off. I was actually, I was midway through the ribbing on the bottom when I injured my wrist. So I was like, oh, come on, like what opportune timing, right? So I was stuck there for a bit, and then I started feeling better, and I was like, okay, before I do anything else, I'm just gonna finish this vest and cast it off, and I did. So the Soleia vest, I've shown you my version before, but in case you weren't around for that, it's got this mock cable pattern that you make with increases and decreases, yarn overs and slip knits and knit two togethers. And then it's just a lot of ribbing. So you pick up and knit a double folded collar in ribbing, and you pick up and knit ribbing for button bands on the sides, and then you pick up and knit ribbing for the bottom of the vest. And so the last thing I have to do for this is I have to block it, and I have to add buttons. This color, she requested specifically, this is Drops Air in the shade Coral Reef. It's their 23. I think it's a mix. It might be a unicolor, but I think it's a mix. And yeah, I showed her Drops Air because that is the yarn that I used for the original pattern. I used Purple Haze. And so I showed her all the Drops Air, and I was like, this is what you can choose from. So choose your color. And she wanted Coral Reef. And so the buttons that I have for her are these little guys. So I'm going to take one out and see if I can show you. I picked up a lot of buttons when I knit my first sample, and these are some that I had left over. So they look like this. They're kind of turtle shell-y, and they have a silver border. I don't know if it's focusing, but that is the button that I'm using, and her size calls for 6 buttons, and I have 6 buttons exactly here. So that is, that's the last thing I have to do before I am finished with her Soleia vest. And then I am going to see her in June because Kevin and I are going to go visit my grandma in India, and just hang out with her for a little bit. And my mom is going to be there. So we're going to visit my mom and my grandma, and then we are going to go to Japan. So those are our summer plans. And I will drop by and drop this off with my mom on my way over. So it will be ready for her. I know I was telling you guys that it wasn't finished in January when she came to visit us here in Tromsø, but it will be finished for her in the summer. So it'll be perfect in time for the fall. So I'm excited to give that to her, and I'm excited to have that off my needles. That was there for a while. I think it was like 6 months-ish, 6 months of the Soleia vest on my needles. So it was a bit. Okay. So that's kind of like whip, finished object, both, kinda. So the next whip that I have, which is a genuine whip, is the Eurus sweater, Eurus sweater by Knit. So this is I first saw this pattern when it was in testing, and it is just a gorgeous side-to-side cable pullover. So basically you knit the sleeve first, and then you cast on stitches for the body and knit that, and then eventually I'm gonna split. So this is like the midway marker that I have up here, and then I'm gonna split for the front and the back and knit each portion separately, and then I'm going to join them again, knit the other side, and then knit the final sleeve. And this is definitely a journey. I'm knitting this in Drops Air in the shade, in the shade 14. I don't know what color name that is, but it's like it's a very kind of magenta-y, heathery, like very rich pinkish purple, which I think is really, really nice for this cable pattern. And it's also quite springy. I'm just trying to make sure the stitches don't fall off my needles because we are dangerously close here. So this is actually a really, really fun construction to knit. I have been having a very fun time, and it looks really complicated, right? But the cables are so simple that it's great Netflix knitting for me, because you basically, if you want to remember how you cable, you just look at what you've done before. So as soon as, like, I think here when I cast on new stitches, that's when I really had to pay attention to like how I was cabling and make sure I was twisting my stitches the right way. But after you get past that, it's just looking at what you've done before and doing the same thing again, basically, or just following the pattern as it makes sense intuitively. So my big snafu with this project wasn't actually the project itself, it was what happened while I was knitting it. So I had these drops circular needles, wooden 6mm, 80 centimeters long, right? So I have cast on new stitches for my front and back, and I am knitting along on the body, and all of a sudden I'm like, this feels awfully loose, and you know what happened? This. So as I was knitting, somehow the tip of my needle broke off like this, and all of my stitches were just like sitting in this gap between my needle and my cord, and I had a mini heart attack. I was so panicked about it. So I very quickly, at first I was like, oh, Kevin, and I called him over and I was upset, and then I got my sewing needle and I got some yarn, and I kind of very carefully picked the stitches back up. The good thing about Drops Air is that it's kind of a very frictiony yarn, like the stitches don't just slip out, right? They kind of hold their shape a bit, so I was able to like pick up every single stitch, even though I was on a cable row, so that was kind of intense. So I picked up all of them. I went to another one of my local yarn stores, Bundingen, and I picked up 6mm needles from Sunless Garn, because I was like, okay, maybe it's time to like up the budget a little bit. Definitely on my Christmas list for this year, now that I have learned that like needle quality does matter, I want to buy either the Chiagu or the Likka interchangeables, because I think it's about time, you guys, that I invest in a good interchangeable set. Because like before, when I picked these up, I was like, it's okay. These were like $4 per set of needles. So I was like, $4 now sounds much better than paying like over $100 for a set of interchangeables. And now I'm like, okay, but with the amount of $4 knitting needles you have to buy, maybe it makes more sense to just get a set of interchangeables. So that is one of my my plans for acquisitions later this year. Another plan that I have been talking about, but I haven't actually manifested into happening, is I want to buy an umbrella swift and a yarn winder, because I have so many like hanks of yarn that are unwound, and I used to just wind them up on my knees, and now I'm like, okay, I have almost 30 like hanks of yarn sitting in my stash, and I cannot just keep winding them on my knees. I think it's time. We have developed enough as a knitter that we can buy nice things for ourselves. So I am going to get myself an umbrella swift and yarn winder. There were some good recommendations when I first asked, but if you have any more recommendations for that, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I am always appreciative of advice from people who have made these hard purchasing decisions in the past. So yes, that is my snafu. And this is so funny. I kind of want to I was going to throw these needles out, but I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe we keep them as a reminder that you don't buy just budget products, because this happens. Okay, so we're done messing with the needles. Moving on. My last cast on that I want to show you is something that it's not very impressive, but it's something that I told you I would cast on before the Easter break. This is the start of my Pauline Genser, which is a sweater that Garnius, I think they're a Norwegian yarn distributor, but now I found out that they have a Danish site, so I think they're a Scandinavian yarn distributor, maybe European in general. But yeah, they collaborate with some independent designers, and they put out these yarn packs. And I bought the one for the Pauline Genser, and I'll put a picture of that up so you can see, because you don't get an idea what it looks like from this. But it is a sweater that is knit in the round from the bottom up on 3 and 3.5 millimeter needles. So I was like, this is the perfect road trip project. I'll just bring this with me. Because it was a 4-hour drive-ish to Senja and a 4-hour drive back, and so I was like, that will be good, it'll keep me occupied. Unfortunately, my knitting injury happened, so I didn't get a lot of work done on this, because I've also figured that my wrist pain gets exacerbated when I knit on smaller needles, so I'm like, okay, while it feels better, let's maybe not do something that makes it feel bad. Let's knit on this in very small intervals, and as soon as it starts hurting, I put it away, because I am not trying to mess around with wrist pain, because I love knitting too much. I genuinely had withdrawals when I couldn't knit, so it was like, okay, maybe I don't knit with pain. But yeah, so that's why this isn't as impressive as it probably could have been if I had actually knit the whole 8 hours of our drive. But it is, so I'm using this yarn that is called Baby Merino by Marinor. It's like a fingering weight yarn. It's 100% superwash merino. It's 170 meters in a 50 gram skein. And this is the main color. It's like a honey, it's color 140, and the contrast color is 005. It's like kind of a white off-white type situation. And my only complaint really with this yarn is that it does this while I knit. It's very twisty. Like, for some reason it gets these little twists in it, and it's hard to get those out. So it's not like the biggest deal, but it is a little bit frustrating that this happens, because I haven't really experienced that with other yarns. Is that like a superwash thing? I haven't knit that much with superwash yarns. This is actually one of the first yarn kits I ever bought. I bought this yarn before I had ever actually knit a sweater. So I didn't know much about purchasing yarns and yarn qualities and what you should look for, what you should avoid. I just thought the sweater was really pretty and I wanted to knit it. And so I think I still will. This isn't like luxurious yarn or anything, but I do like the stitch definition. I like the way it's knitting up, so I think I'll keep going. But yeah, it's just, I'm a bit oddly surprised by all of this. Moving on to acquisitions. So I don't actually have any yarny acquisitions to show you today, but I do have something kind of cool that I've been meaning to buy for quite some time, and that is, that I haven't even opened yet, a little cork board. And the reason why this is a knitting acquisition and not just like a home decor type acquisition is because as a knitwear designer, I swatch a lot, right? I am pretty bad at swatching for other people's designs. When I knit something like the Euro sweater, for example, I didn't swatch. And, mea culpa, but I just kind of look at what other knitters have knit. I look at what yarns they have used. And if they've used the yarn that I'm going to use, I just look at their Ravelry page, I look at their notes, and then I just go from there. But the one time that I do swatch is when I make my own designs, because you have to. So I have all these swatches sitting in my stash that I really want to just put up somewhere, because I like them so much. I'm so proud of them. They have so much little history in them. So I wanted to buy a little cork board so I could hang that up and tack my swatches to them and show them off. So the swatches that I have here, and I'm going to try to put this away without knocking anything over. There we go. The swatches that I have here to show you, this is the ones that I pulled out of my stash super quick. This is a swatch for the Kamari sweater, which was made with Thought to Thread Ritual DK in the shade Seattle Gray. So this was fun. I actually blocked this swatch in like a little bowl in my parents' house, and I pinned it to so I was one of those basic teenagers that had the cork board with the thumbtacks that you would like hang necklaces off of. Like, I thought that was a really cool kind of eclectic way to store my jewelry way back when, so I still had that hanging in my childhood bedroom. So I used some thumbtacks to like block this on the cork board. And I have this swatch from my Bonnieux cardigan that was knit in La Droguerie du Vey d'Anjou, because I wanted to see how these increases would work out. So that's a fun little swatch. I have this swatch from the Solnedgang sweater, which I'm actually in the process of writing up the free pattern now. But I wanted to see how this would work out and how the pattern would look as well, the little stitch pattern I had going. And this is a swatch of Cardiff Cashmere, of the Methfjord sweater. because I wanted to see how this little cable in the bottom would look, and also get my gauge for stockinette. So all of these very pretty, very precious to me swatches that I want to take out of my leftover yarn storage and display proudly. So one of the things I'm going to do first, obviously, is weave in the ends for these swatches, and then I want to tack them to my little cork board and show them off. And maybe it can even be another background where I can podcast in front of in the future, so that would be kind of fun. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I think next time I need a break from knitting, pattern designing, all that kind of stuff, I'll get around to doing that. So I hope that you enjoyed having a little chat with me today. I hope that you liked some of what you saw. I'm really interested in knowing what is on your needles at the moment. What are you looking forward to cast on? Give me all the details. If you liked this video, then feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for more nitty chatty content. It really helps me out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. And if you want to come over and say hi to me outside of YouTube, then you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry and TikTok as the Strikkechick, and you can also find me on my own website, strikkechick.com. Until next time, you guys, happy knitting! Bye!